This is Franklin Rye, and welcome back to Political Spirits. We still stand for the proposition that the left and the right should have a few drinks and talk. Compromise is not a requirement. If those discussions result in us changing or even abandoning our positions, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. We just need to talk to each other. In that way, we can unify through speech. And if the discussion becomes a bit heated, at the end of the night, we should still be able to split up the bar tab and be on our way. So what are we going to talk about this week? Well, let's talk about the announcement of former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz that he's considering running as an independent for president in 2020. The self-made billionaire's announcement prompted a firestorm of adverse reactions from the left, the common thread being, "Holy cow, that would virtually guarantee Trump's re-election." Now, I think that's an overstatement by those who fear that such a run would guarantee Trump 4 more years. But let's talk about Schultz's announcement, his explanation for why he's considering running, his political positions, likely impact on Trump's re-election chances, and why I think he's considering running. In his announcement, Schultz tweeted, "I love our country, and I'm seriously considering running for president as a centrist independent." Since then, he's rejected calls to run as a Republican, and he's criticized the Democrat Party for moving too far to the left and for pushing proposals that we can't afford, such as free health care and college. He's generally opposed to President Trump's more isolationist tendencies. He also has stated that he is extremely concerned about the nation's debt level. Schultz is a lifelong Democrat who's contributed to multiple major Democratic candidates. He's been critical of Trump's tax cuts and some of Trump's immigration restrictions, such as the restrictions on refugees from certain countries, the majority of which are Muslim. In an interview with NBC News, described in an article by Alan Smith on NBCnews.com on January 30, Schultz explained that he's no longer a Democrat because he disagrees with the Democratic Party on a number of issues. He specifically pointed out Democrats' support for taking over health care from private industry, providing free college for everyone, and committing the government to provide jobs to everyone. His response to those positions? We can't afford it. On that point, he is, of course, correct. He also pointed out that the direction which Elizabeth Warren wants to take us in is towards socialism, and that we shouldn't pursue that direction. The Hill publication tweeted a quote from Schultz that may get to the bottom of his concerns. Schultz said, "We shouldn't get to a place where there are people yelling from the rafters that because you've been successful, you are a bad person and we're going to be punitive to you." That's, to me, the antithesis of the spirit of the country. Incidentally, in that respect, I agree with Howard Schultz 100%. The response from the left has been just short of apoplectic. Many on the left are convinced that Howard Schultz running as an independent would pull enough voters from the Democrat camp that it would virtually guarantee a win for Donald Trump. I'm not quite so sure. It is probably more likely that Schultz would increase the chances for a Trump win than a win for the Democrat candidate or a win for Schultz, because Schultz would attract traditional Democrats who are not hard leftists, but who are so turned off by Trump that they would vote for a Democrat in the absence of a third-party candidate. Countering those voters would be the Republicans, who are turned off by Trump's demeanor or statements or his willingness to play hardball on trade negotiations, who may vote Republican because the Democrats are so far to the left, but who might be attracted by an independent Schultz candidacy. On balance, I think the commentators who believe that there would be more dissatisfied Democrats than dissatisfied Republicans drawn to Schultz are probably correct. So why is Schultz doing this? It's certainly possible he believes he can win, and I don't think we can rule out that possibility. It's also possible that he's talking about running just to promote interest in his new book, although frankly I think that's unlikely. I think consideration needs to be given to the possibility that he is legitimately very concerned about the direction of the Democrat Party, and in that respect he's certainly not alone. What appears to be a very serious move towards actual socialism is a threat to the continuation of our republic, It's a threat to the overwhelming economic power that America has possessed since the end of World War II. My belief is that the Democrat Party has moved so far to the left that the best thing that can happen to it, for the good of the country and for the good of the Democrat Party, is for it to get absolutely slaughtered in the 2020 election. In other words, the same thing that happened to the party after it nominated George McGovern in 1972 needs to happen again. Schultz may believe that the best thing he can do is make sure that the Democrats lose in 2020. But maybe it isn't quite that simple. Maybe what he believes is that there is a benefit in scaring the party bigwigs with the threat of his independent candidacy. He hasn't actually made a final announcement. Perhaps what he's trying to do is to warn them that if you don't take steps away from the extreme left and move back towards the center, you run the risk of me moving forward with my centrist independent candidacy and either ensuring that Donald Trump wins or perhaps winning as a long-shot independent. We've certainly seen the party take steps in the past, most recently in the last presidential election, to make sure that a particular non-socialist candidate wins. Maybe he's trying to make sure that happens again. I have no inside information in that respect, but it's an interesting possibility. Next topic. Virginia Democrat Governor Ralph Northam's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week. This past Wednesday, Virginia Democrat Governor Ralph Northam was asked in an interview about a bill pending in the Virginia legislature which would allow abortions in the third trimester even up until the point of birth. Sponsor, Democrat Delegate Kathy Tran, had been asked whether abortion would be allowed even after the mother was dilated, and she acknowledged it would be allowed under her bill. Northam was asked for his thoughts, and he supported the bill and said, quote, "If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother." Close quote. Now, Kathy Tran's acknowledgement that her bill would allow abortion even after the mother was already dilated and after the birth process had commenced, had produced a storm of controversy. But that was nothing compared to the understandably distressed reaction of many to what appeared to be a statement by Governor Northam, who incidentally is a doctor, indicating that a baby could be born allowed and allowed to die through lack of medical assistance if the mother wished. In essence, aborted after birth. Northam later explained in another interview that his comments were directed towards cases of, quote, severe deformities, close quote, and that, quote, there may be a fetus that's non-viable, close quote. That explanation produced additional pushback because that raises the specter of allowing a baby with disabilities to die after being born, once again raising the prospect of, in essence, an abortion after birth. You would think that would be more than enough of a bad week for a politician, but there was more to come for Governor Northam. Photos from his page in his medical school yearbook were released which showed a person dressed in blackface, actually full blackening of all visible skin, next to a person dressed in a Ku Klux Klan robe and hood. When I first saw it, I have to admit I thought somebody doctored up some photos and that we would soon find out it was a hoax, but that's not what happened. On Friday, Governor Northam acknowledged that he had in fact appeared in the photograph. He didn't say whether he was the person in blackface or the person in the KKK robe and hood, but based on Northam's height, it is highly unlikely that he would be the person in the KKK outfit. His height is listed on at least 2 internet sites, and in both of them he's listed as 6 feet tall. That listed height also is in line with his apparent approximate height when you see him in public. The person in the KKK outfit is dramatically shorter than the person in blackface. The difference appears to be about 9 or 10 inches. So if he were the person in the KKK outfit, the person in blackface would have to be nearly 6 feet 10 inches tall, which certainly seems unlikely. In Northam's acknowledgement that he appeared in the photograph, He described it as, quote, clearly racist and offensive, close quote, and noted that the, quote, behavior is not in keeping with who I am today, close quote. The governor was then faced with calls to resign from Republicans and Democrats, including multiple Democrats who are pursuing the presidential nomination. Incidentally, as further evidence that CNN has fallen off a cliff as a legitimate news source, it ran a chyron incorrectly listing the governor's party affiliation as Republican. There have been so many such instances with CNN that I really must question whether they're just mistakes. Incredibly, less than 24 hours after acknowledging he was in the photo of the person in blackface and the person in the KKK outfit, Northam held a press conference and said he no longer believes that he's either of the people in the photo. Now, we can have a discussion about whether it was common in the South in 1984, when this incident occurred, to have persons dress in blackface or KKK outfits at costume parties. But I can tell you that I have an incredibly hard time believing that someone who isn't suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's couldn't remember whether they dressed up in blackface, including blackening all of their visible skin, and were photographed next to a person in a Ku Klux Klan robe and hood. I acknowledge that things have changed since 1984, but that was the time when I was in college, and I attended college in the South, and there is no way the image depicted in that photo was so common that anybody could forget being a part of it. I never saw anything like it, and I can't imagine that the governor could forget being part of it. What makes his denial that he appears in the photo particularly strange, apart from the fact that 24 hours earlier he said that he was in the photo, is that he said he was confused because he did actually appear in blackface as Michael Jackson in a dance contest. He explained that because his memory of participation in the Michael Jackson dance contest is so vivid, he's now convinced that he's not the one in the photo with the person in the KKK outfit. Got that? Because he has a vivid memory of being in the Michael Jackson dance contest dressed in blackface, and he doesn't have a vivid memory of appearing in blackface next to a person in a KKK robe, he must not be the person in blackface next to the KKK robe. Okay. So why did he think he was the person in blackface in the photo on his own yearbook page for his medical school when he talked about it just 24 hours earlier? We're talking about a governor and a physician here, not a confused homeless person or someone being kept awake all night for an interrogation. This is a 59-year-old governor of a major state and a medical doctor. Come on. Moreover, the governor described the blackface he used as Michael Jackson in the dance contest as being a little bit of shoe polish on his cheeks, and he said he used so little because it's hard to get off. Now, frankly, I'm suspicious that he was trying to describe something less than full blackface as a way of avoiding acknowledging that he dressed in blackface. And of course, CNN took the bait and referred to it as, quote, darkening his skin, close quote. But by describing such a limited amount of blackening, he completely undermined his argument that he was confused about the blackface photo with the person in the KKK outfit, because he had darkened his skin to portray Michael Jackson in a dance contest. Look at the photo of the person in blackface next to the person in the KKK outfit. That is an extreme level of blackface. Every inch of visible skin is blackened, completely. It just doesn't make sense that the governor could have confused one with the other. There's more, though. Under Northam's Virginia Military Institute yearbook photo, rather than his medical school yearbook photo, it lists two nicknames. The first is Goose, which I at first thought was a reference to the character in Top Gun. But it turns out the yearbook photo was from 1981, 5 years before the movie Top Gun was released. Regardless, that nickname is not the one at issue. The second nickname is Coon Man. Given that this detail was discovered or publicized shortly after the photo from his medical school yearbook, with the person in blackface and the person in the Klan outfit, it was an eye-opener. People are assuming that it was intended as a reference to a racial slur, but that isn't really clear. It could easily have referred to some hunting incident or a host of pranks or jokes involving raccoons, but it's never been explained, because Northam advised that he was given the nickname by two individuals who were a year ahead of him, and he doesn't know why they did so. Once again, it's hard to believe what he is using as an explanation. What makes all of this even more galling is that during the gubernatorial campaign against Republican Ed Gillespie, Democrat Ralph Northam equated Gillespie with the white supremacists in Charlottesville, where a white supremacist ran over and killed a young woman when he ran his Dodge Challenger into a group of counter-protesters. For Northam to have equated Gillespie with white supremacists understandably angered Gillespie and his supporters. That Northam did it with this photograph in his background makes it seem all the more obnoxious. But I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. Hypocrisy seems to have nearly become a bona fide occupational qualification for politicians these days. Next topic. They shall not grow old. I recently saw a documentary in the theater entitled They Shall Not Grow Old. It was directed and produced by Peter Jackson. That's the Peter Jackson who directed the Lord of the Rings trilogy and King Kong and other major movie releases. The documentary was commissioned by the Imperial War Museum, the British museum which is committed to the history of World War I. Now, I have to admit I've never seen a documentary in a movie theater. The reviews I looked through in advance of attending were very positive, but I was a bit skeptical that I would be entertained, even though I am more than a bit of a history buff. I was understandably concerned that I might be bored by some of the film. I was not. What Peter Jackson did to produce this movie is amazing. He restored 100 hours of World War I-era footage in the Imperial Museum's collection, and then chose from those 100 hours the most appropriate portions for the film. I'm not quite sure it really does justice to what his team accomplished to say that they restored the footage. Restoring it makes it seem like they simply brought it back to its original state before the thousands of replays and duplications over the years which deteriorated the quality of the film. They did so much more than that, and they talk about all those processes in a 30-minute mini-film which follows the 2-hour documentary itself. If you go, you must stay after the credits to watch the additional 30-minute film about how they made the movie. The experience really is not complete unless you watch it. So what did they do beyond restoring? They were able to take film produced at the jerky speed we've all seen from that era and modify it to the correct speed that depicts movement in the same way you would see it in a modern film, and then adjust the quality of the facial images so that at points it seems like a modern movie. They then were able to take these silent films and add sound by using teams of lip readers and historical researchers to determine what was being said, and then use actors to add the voices. And then, of course, they colorized it. They got some help in doing so as a result of Peter Jackson actually owning a collection of World War I uniforms so that they could get the colors just right. If you're looking for a historical documentary that spans all aspects of the war, including not just ground battle but also air war, the war at sea, and the struggles on the home front, you'll be disappointed. That's not what this movie is about. Instead, it's an attempt to display the day-to-day life of ordinary British soldiers on the front in the trenches. Jackson acknowledges that life on the front was not significantly different for American soldiers in the trenches, for example, but the vast majority of the footage they have is of British soldiers. And there was no attempt to depict the war in the air or at sea. The focus was on the trenches and the preparation of the recruits for the war. I encourage you to attend the film. If you have kids who are in high school or above, I encourage you to take them with you. This is an R-rated movie because of disturbing war imagery. For kids younger than high school, it's probably too intense. I know that those in middle school watch The Walking Dead on television, and the level of gore in that series is over the top. But this is the real thing, and it's probably too much for kids before high school. Not because of gore, but rather because of the realization that this is real life. So why do I think you should take your kids? Because frankly, when you see this depiction of real life just about 100 years ago, it makes it seem like we're living in a Hollywood production now. That we're living in something that is just too good to be true. The level of brutality, the degradation of human existence during World War I was so extreme that it's difficult to comprehend. As our kids, and frankly we as well, consider how we'd probably believe ourselves to be living in medieval times if we lost internet connectivity for even a day, it seems incomprehensible that these kids, as young as 15, were sleeping in the mud in the trenches. No cots, no tents, no Quonset huts, no heaters, no blankets, just uniforms and mud. No toilet paper, just hands. When you watch the film, take a look at the teeth of many of the young enlisted men and boys and compare them to what you see now. We've all heard about bad British teeth, presumably stained by tea, but this is something different. I've never seen so many radically crooked teeth in all my life. We all operate based on the assumption that braces are available to everyone, but orthodontics were not commonly available back then and few could afford them. Take a look at the food that these soldiers survived on, and ask yourself how much different is it really than some of the worst slop you've ever seen depicted in a prison movie. Now consider what these kids went through during the artillery barrages, including, most terrifying of all, with chemical weapons. One of the most shocking descriptions for me came from an interview with a survivor from the British infantry who had no gas mask and was caught in the middle of a gas attack. He survived by shoving his head into the urine bucket and holding his breath as long as he could, then pulling it out, taking a shallow breath, and shoving it back in, over and over until the gas attack was done. It was just the kind of thing you had to do to survive. As we go about our daily lives, struggling to get everything done, trying to find the best route through traffic to work, deciding whether to eat in or go out, and worrying about whether the kid's next report card will be as good as it should be, They Shall Not Grow Old can give us some perspective. When all is said and done, we and our kids have soft beds, not mud. Our teeth are straight, and we can rise up each day in complete confidence that we won't have to stick our heads into a bucket of urine to try to make it to the next day. We are lucky, and much of our luck is the result of the hard work and the bravery of those who came before us. I encourage you to take your kids to They Shall Not Grow Old as a reminder of that fact. Now comes the time when I remind you that I'll be back next week with another episode of Political Spirits. I look forward to it, and I trust you do as well. Until then, be sure to tell your friends about Political Spirits, and follow me on Twitter at Franklin Rye. This is Franklin Rye. Thank you for listening.